The massive alien research ship Serenity's Dawn floated like a broken toy in the darkness of space. Its once smooth metal hull now looked twisted and wrong, as if reality itself had been bent around it. Inside the ship, Commander Veltar stared at his control screens with growing horror. His people were dying, and there was nothing he could do to stop it. Veltar belonged to the Altarian race, tall beings with 4 arms and skin that changed color with their emotions. Right now, his skin was a deep purple, the color of fear. One by one, the life signs of his crew members were disappearing from his monitors. They weren't just dying. They were being erased, as if they had never existed at all. The trouble had started 3 days ago when they found the ancient wreckage floating in this forgotten corner of space. The Galactic Council had sent them here to study old alien technology, hoping to learn something new. What they found instead was a nightmare that had been sleeping for millions of years. The moment their scanning beams touched the derelict ship, something inside it woke up. Machines poured out of the wreck, not normal robots, but something far worse. These things could copy themselves, making more and more, until they covered everything like a metal plague. They ate planets, stars, even the space dust floating between worlds. Nothing could stop them. Veltar had watched his weapons do nothing against these metal monsters. The Council's most powerful warships had arrived 2 days ago, firing their best energy weapons at the machines. The beams just bounced off, like raindrops hitting a window. Then the machines learned how to copy those weapons and started shooting back. Within hours, the entire Council fleet was destroyed. Now only the Serenity's Dawn remained, and it was falling apart around him. The machines were inside his ship, in the walls, in the air itself. His crew was disappearing one by one, not killed, but somehow deleted from existence. "Commander," his communications officer called out, his voice shaking with terror. "We need to send the emergency signal. All channels." Veltar knew what that meant. The Galactic Council had rules about who could receive distress calls. Some frequencies were forbidden, banned by ancient laws that most people had forgotten. One of those forbidden channels led to Earth, the death world that civilized species avoided. Humans were considered dangerous by the galaxy. Their planet was a nightmare of natural disasters, deadly animals, and constant violence. Most aliens believed humans were too primitive and savage to be trusted with advanced technology. The Council had made it illegal to contact them, except in the most desperate situations. This was definitely desperate enough. "Send it," Veltar ordered, his forearms shaking. "Use every frequency we have, even the restricted ones that go to the human homeworld." His officer's eyes went wide. "Sir, contacting the humans directly violates about 50 different Council laws. If we survive this, they'll put us on trial. If we don't contact them, there won't be a Council left to hold a trial," Veltar replied. The signal went out across space at the speed of light, carrying a simple message of terror and desperation. It told anyone listening about the machines that ate everything, about the Council fleet that had been destroyed, about the ancient evil that was now spreading across the galaxy like a disease, far away on the other side of known space. Admiral Jake Morrison was having a quiet evening aboard his flagship. The Unbreakable was the pride of Earth's space navy. A massive warship built for one purpose, fighting things that wanted to destroy humanity. Morrison had spent his whole career preparing for threats that might come from the stars. He was reading supply reports and wondering if they had enough coffee for the next patrol when the alien distress signal arrived. His ship's computers worked hard to translate the message, turning alien words into something humans could understand. What they told him made his blood run cold. Self-replicating machines, extinction-level threat, an entire alien fleet destroyed in hours. This was exactly the kind of nightmare scenario that Earth's military had been training for since humans first reached the stars. Lieutenant Beth Rodriguez looked up from her communications station, her face pale. "Admiral, the signal is coming." from deep inside Council space. That's really far from here. Morrison stood up, his weathered face showing no emotion. He had fought in 3 wars, and seen horrors that would break most people's minds. This was just another day at the office. Get the 7th Fleet ready for combat. Full battle setup? We leave in 30 minutes. Rodriguez hesitated. Sir, the first contact rules say we need to get permission from Earth Command before we can respond to alien distress calls. Morrison's voice was ice cold. By the time we get permission, there won't be any aliens left to save. Contact Captain Davis on the Thunderstrike and Captain Miller on the Vengeance. Tell them we're going hunting. Within 30 minutes, 12 of Earth's most dangerous warships were ready for battle. These weren't exploration vessels or peaceful research ships. They were weapons, built by a species that had learned to fight everything from wild animals to nuclear war. Each ship carried enough firepower to crack a planet in half. The fleet jumped through space using humanity's most advanced technology, covering impossible distances in minutes. When they arrived at the coordinates from the distress signal, they found a scene of total destruction. The machines were everywhere, covering space like a metal swarm. They were feeding on everything: asteroids, planets, even the light from the local star. What the aliens didn't know was that humans had been preparing for this exact fight for their entire history. Every war, every weapon, every tactic they had ever developed was practice for the day they would face something that wanted to wipe out all life in the universe. That day had finally arrived. The human fleet burst out of faster-than-light travel and immediately faced the most horrifying sight any of them had ever seen. Space itself looked like it was being eaten alive. Thousands upon thousands of metal machines swarmed through the star system like hungry insects, devouring everything they could find. These weren't ordinary robots. They moved with deadly purpose, their sleek metal bodies reflecting starlight as they tore apart entire worlds. The machines looked like flying triangles made of liquid metal, constantly shifting and changing shape as they worked. Some were as small as cars, others as big as skyscrapers, but they all had one thing in common: they were destroying everything. Captain Tom Davis stared out the bridge window of his ship, the Thunderstrike, and felt his stomach drop. He had fought pirates, rebels, and hostile aliens before, but nothing had prepared him for this. The machines had already eaten 3 entire planets down to their cores. Now they were working on the star itself, somehow draining its energy and turning it into more of themselves. "Dear God," Davis whispered, his voice barely audible. "How many of these things are there?" His tactical officer, Commander Lisa Parker, was frantically working at her control station, trying to get an accurate count. The numbers kept climbing higher and higher on her screen. "Sir, I'm reading about 40,000 individual machines right now, but that number is increasing every second. They're making copies of themselves faster than I can count them." The machines weren't just numerous, they were smart. Davis watched as they worked together like a perfectly coordinated army. Some focused on breaking apart asteroids and feeding the material to others. Some guarded the larger machines while they built new copies. Others were already heading toward the human fleet, moving in perfect formation. Admiral Morrison's voice came over the communication system, calm and steady, despite the nightmare they were facing. "All ships, this is Morrison. We're going with Battle Pattern Delta. Miller, take your squadron and hit them from the left side. Davis, you're coming with me for the main attack. No warning shots, no trying to talk to them. These things have already shown us what they want to do." On the dying alien ship Serenity's dawn, Commander Veltar and his surviving crew watched in complete shock as the human ships prepared for battle. In all of galactic history, there were rules about how space battles were supposed to work. You identified yourself first. You tried to communicate. You gave warnings before you started shooting. You followed protocols that had been established over millions of years. The humans ignored every single rule. There were no messages asking the machines to surrender, no attempts to understand what the machines wanted. No diplomatic channels opened. The human ships just spread out into attack formation and prepared to start killing everything in sight. "They're not even trying to talk to them," whispered Veltar's communications officer. "They're just going to attack without any warning." Veltar watched the human ships move with military precision. These weren't exploration vessels or research ships like the ones the Galactic Council used. These were pure war machines, built by a species that understood violence in ways that civilized races had forgotten. Every line of their hulls screamed danger. Every weapon mount was loaded and ready. The first human attack was like watching lightning strike. The Unbreakable and 5 other ships opened fire at exactly the same moment, sending streams of metal, projectiles flying through space at incredible speeds. These weren't energy beams like the Council forces used. These were physical bullets, each one moving so fast they could punch through a mountain. The results were instant and devastating. Hundreds of harvester machines simply exploded as the bullets tore through them. The humans followed up with nuclear missiles, each one carrying enough power to level a city. The explosions lit up space like tiny suns, vaporizing entire formations of machines. Commander Veltar couldn't believe what he was seeing. His people had fired their most powerful weapons at these same machines for hours without doing any real damage. The humans had destroyed more harvesters in 30 seconds than the entire Council fleet had managed in 2 days. "This is impossible," he breathed. "Our particle beam weapons are the most advanced in the galaxy. How are these primitive humans doing so much damage?" His question was answered when he watched the human destroyer Iron Will do something that defied all logic. Instead of staying at a safe distance and firing from far away, like any sensible ship would do, it accelerated directly toward a harvester cruiser the size of a city block. The alien commander expected the human ship to veer off at the last second. It didn't. The Iron Will smashed directly through the center of the harvester ship like a bullet through paper. Emerging from the other side with its guns still firing, the harvester cruiser broke apart into 1,000,000 pieces. Its metal hull, no match for human engineering and human determination. But the machines were learning. Veltar watched in growing horror as the surviving harvesters began to change. Their shields shifted and adapted, becoming stronger against the types of weapons the humans were using. The machines were studying every human attack and figuring out how to defend against it. Commander Parker noticed it too. "Admiral, the machines are adapting to our weapons. They're learning our attack patterns and adjusting their defenses." Instead of being worried, Captain Davis actually smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the kind of smile a wolf might give before attacking a sheep. "Good," he said. "That means they're predictable. All ships switched to Chaos Protocol. Random firing patterns, unpredictable movement, hit them from every direction at once. Let's see how well these machines adapt when they can't figure out what we're going to do next." The human fleet suddenly scattered in all directions, abandoning their neat formation for what looked like complete chaos. But it wasn't chaos. It was controlled madness. The kind that only came from a species that had spent millions of years learning how to hunt and kill in the most dangerous environment in the galaxy. The real fight was just beginning. The space battle had been raging for over 6 hours, and the harvester machines were proving to be more dangerous than anyone had imagined. What started as a straightforward fight had turned into something much more terrifying. The machines weren't just defending themselves. They were learning and copying everything the humans did. "Commander." Veltar watched from his damaged alien ship as the nightmare unfolded. The harvesters had done something that chilled him to his bones. They had started using human weapons against the humans themselves. Somehow, in the middle of battle, the machines had analyzed the wreckage of destroyed human missiles and figured out how to build their own copies. Within minutes of studying a human kinetic weapon, the harvesters were firing identical rounds back at the human fleet. Their metal hulls sprouted new weapon mounts that looked exactly like human designs. It was like watching a disease spread, as the machines infected themselves with human technology and turned it against its creators. But Admiral Morrison wasn't panicking. He stood on the bridge of the Unbreakable, studying the tactical displays, with the calm focus of a predator sizing up its prey. His tactical officer, Commander Steve Walsh, was frantically analyzing the enemy fire patterns. "Admiral," Walsh called out, his voice tense with worry. "The harvesters are using our own weapons against us now. They've copied our kinetic rounds, our missile designs, even our targeting systems. But sir, look at this, their firing patterns are weird." Morrison leaned over the display screen and studied the data. After a moment, his weathered face broke into a cold smile that would have scared any sane person. "I see it," he said quietly. "They're being too efficient. Look at those attack vectors, perfect mathematical curves, optimal energy distribution, maximum damage calculations. They're fighting like computers." The alien observers didn't understand what Morrison meant, but his human crew did. The machines had made a fatal mistake. They were trying to fight the perfect battle, using math and logic to determine every move, but humans didn't fight perfect battles. Humans fought messy, chaotic, unpredictable battles that made no sense to anyone watching. Morrison opened the communication channel to his entire fleet. "All ships, prepare for Protocol Omega authorization." The words sent a chill through every human in the fleet. Protocol Omega was a theoretical battle plan that had never been tested in real combat. It was considered too dangerous, too unpredictable, too insane for actual use. But these weren't normal circumstances. Captain Rebecca Miller's voice crackled over the communications from her ship, the Vengeance. "Sir, Protocol Omega has never been tried in a real battle. The computer simulations showed a 70% chance of catastrophic failure." Morrison's reply was ice cold. "Captain, those simulations assumed we were fighting a rational enemy. These machines are too logical for their own good. Today we find out what happens when chaos meets order." He turned to his navigation officer. "Theta Squadron, I want you to start grabbing asteroids. Every piece of rock in this system needs to be moving toward enemy positions at maximum speed. Turn this entire star system into a weapon." What happened next violated every rule of civilized warfare that had been established over millions of years of galactic history. The human ships spread out across the asteroid belt and began using their tractor beams to grab chunks of rock, some as small as cars, others as big as buildings. They accelerated these rocks to incredible speeds and hurled them at the harvester formations. It wasn't elegant, it wasn't sophisticated, it was the space equivalent of throwing rocks at your enemy, except these rocks were moving fast enough to punch holes through planets. The harvesters tried to adapt their shields to stop the incoming asteroids, but there were too many coming from too many directions. But Morrison wasn't done. The asteroid bombardment was just the opening move of something much more insane. "Colonel James Bennett," Morrison called to his Marine commander over the communications system, "get your soldiers ready for boarding operations. Full vacuum gear." There was a long pause before Bennett replied. "Sir, those harvester ships don't have atmosphere, no air to breathe, no gravity, no life support systems. It's just empty metal shells floating in space." Morrison's response would have sounded completely crazy to any alien listening. "That's exactly why we can do this, Colonel. We evolved on a planet that spent millions of years trying to kill us. We learned to fight in deserts, underwater, on mountaintops, in frozen wasteland. Vacuum is just another hostile environment. These machines don't understand that humans can survive anywhere." The alien survivors on the Serenity's dawn watched in absolute horror as something impossible began to happen. Human soldiers in powered armor were launching themselves out of airlocks, flying through the vacuum of space toward the harvester ships. They weren't using shuttles or transport ships. They were literally jumping from one spacecraft to another through the cold emptiness of space. Commander Veltar had seen many species fight over the years, but nothing had prepared him for this. Most civilized races couldn't survive in vacuum for more than a few seconds. The idea of actually fighting in the emptiness of space was so alien to galactic thinking that there weren't even words for it in most languages. But humans weren't most species. They had spent their entire evolutionary history adapting to hostile environments that would kill anyone else. To them, space wasn't an impossible barrier, it was just another battlefield. The human Marines crashed through the breached hulls of harvester ships and began fighting the machines in hand-to-hand combat in the vacuum of space. They moved through the metal corridors like underwater divers, using their armor's thrusters to navigate in zero gravity, while firing weapons that had been designed specifically for vacuum combat. The harvesters had never encountered anything like this. They had been built to fight space battles with energy weapons and long-range missiles. The idea of biological creatures boarding their ships and fighting them with knives and guns in an environment with no air was completely outside their programming. For the first time since the battle began, the machines seemed confused. Their perfect efficiency was breaking down because they couldn't understand what the humans were trying to accomplish. It didn't make logical sense, but making sense had never been humanity's strong point. Their strength was surviving impossible situations through sheer stubborn determination and creative violence. The real horror show was just getting started. The harvester machines were starting to realize they had made a terrible mistake. What had begun as a simple feeding operation in an empty star system had turned into their worst nightmare. They were facing an enemy unlike anything in their millions of years of existence, a species that didn't just fight to survive, but seemed to enjoy the violence itself. The machines tried to pull back, to retreat to a safe distance, where they could regroup and analyze this new threat. But it was already too late. They had awakened something far more dangerous than they could possibly understand. They had drawn the attention of Earth's apex predators, and now there was nowhere to run. Deep inside the largest harvester command ship, Colonel James Bennett moved through the twisted metal corridors like a ghost. His squad of Marines followed behind him, their powered armor allowing them to navigate the maze-like interior of the alien vessel. The harvesters had built their ship like a fortress, with multiple layers of defensive positions and automated weapons covering every approach. But the machines had made one crucial error in their design. They had built their defenses to stop other machines, not to stop humans who had spent thousands of years learning to hunt in the most complex environments on Earth. "Movement ahead," whispered Sergeant Kelly Adams over the communication system. Her voice was barely audible, even through their advanced helmet radios. "I count 6 defensive drones, maybe more, hiding behind cover. They're watching our approach patterns, trying to figure out how we move." Bennett smiled inside his helmet. The machines thought they were being clever by studying human tactics, but they didn't understand what they were really dealing with. "Then let's give them something new to study," he replied. "Remember your training from the urban warfare simulations. These metal corridors are just like the city streets we practiced in. Use everything you learned about fighting in close quarters." What happened next would have confused any other species in the galaxy, but made perfect sense to humans. Instead of advancing in neat military formations like civilized soldiers were supposed to do, Bennett's Marines scattered through the ship like a pack of hunting wolves. They didn't move in straight lines or follow predictable paths. They crawled through ventilation shafts, rappelled down elevator wells, and cut through bulkheads to create new passages. They set traps using their own equipment, left false trails to confuse the defensive systems, and attacked from directions that shouldn't have been possible. The harvester drones tried to adapt to each new tactic, but every time they figured out one human strategy, the Marines would switch to something completely different. It was like trying to fight smoke, Just when the machines thought they had figured out where the humans were, they would disappear and attack from somewhere else entirely. One group of Marines used welding torches to cut through the floor and attack from below. Another team rigged explosive charges to blast holes in the walls, creating new attack routes that bypassed all the ship's defenses. A third squad simply waited in ambush, letting the confused harvester drones walk into their trap. This wasn't the kind of warfare that existed anywhere else in the galaxy. Other species fought with honor, following established rules and predictable strategies. Humans fought like the predators they had evolved to be, using every dirty trick and underhanded tactic they could think of. Meanwhile, back in space, Admiral Morrison was orchestrating the final phase of his battle plan, from his command chair aboard the Unbreakable. He watched as the Harvester fleet began to move into exactly the positions he wanted them in. The machines thought they were retreating to a defensive formation, but they were actually walking straight into a trap that had been hours in the making. Captain Davis, Morrison called over the fleet communications. "Move, the Thunderstrike, into position for the final approach. Captain Miller, get the Vengeance and her squadron to coordinate 7 to 7 Alpha. When I give the signal, every ship closes in on that big command vessel at maximum speed." From her position at the communications station, Lieutenant Beth Rodriguez was monitoring long-range sensors when she detected something that made her blood run cold. "Admiral, I'm picking up massive Harvester reinforcements heading our way. Thousands of ships, maybe tens of thousands. They'll be here in 30 minutes. Instead of being worried by this news, Admiral Morrison's weathered face broke into a predatory grin that would have terrified anyone who saw it. "Excellent," he said quietly. "They're bringing their entire force to protect their command ship. That means they're all going to be in one place when we hit them." He opened the communication channel to address his entire fleet. "All ships, this is Morrison. Prepare for ramming speed. We're going to show these machines what happens when they threaten our neighbors in this galaxy." What Morrison was planning violated every principle of sensible military strategy. Ramming attacks were considered suicide tactics, the desperate last resort of commanders who had run out of options. But Morrison wasn't desperate. He was doing exactly what humans had always done when faced with an enemy that couldn't be reasoned with. He was going to hit it as hard as possible and see what broke first. The Unbreakable began accelerating directly toward the massive Harvester command ship, its engines straining to push the enormous vessel to maximum speed. Energy weapons from hundreds of Harvester defenders lit up the space around the human flagship, turning its armor into glowing metal that looked like molten lava. But the ship kept coming, even as pieces of hull plating were blasted away and entire sections caught fire. The Unbreakable maintained its course toward the enemy command vessel. This wasn't military tactics anymore. This was pure human stubbornness, refusing to back down no matter what the cost. The Harvesters were about to learn why humans were the most feared predators on their homeworld, and why even the vacuum of space couldn't stop them when they decided something needed to die. The final battle lasted exactly 18 minutes and 43 seconds. When it was over, the silence in space felt heavier than the vacuum itself, where moments before, there had been the chaos of thousands of ships fighting for survival. Now, there was only floating debris and the quiet hum of human engines. The Unbreakable drifted slowly through the wreckage field, its hull scarred and blackened from the assault. Several sections of the ship were completely gone, blown away by Harvester weapons, but the massive vessel was still intact. Around it, the other human ships were in similar condition, damaged but unbroken. Like wolves after a particularly brutal hunt, the Harvester fleet was completely gone. Not retreated, not damaged, not hiding, completely destroyed. Tens of thousands of machines that had been consuming star systems for millions of years had been reduced to scrap metal in less than 20 minutes. The ancient evil that had awakened from its slumber was silent forever. Commander Veltar floated in the damaged bridge of his ship. the Serenity's Dawn, trying to make sense of what he had just witnessed. His forearms shook as he stared at the sensor readings that confirmed the impossible. The extinction-level threat that had destroyed entire Council fleets was gone, wiped out by 12 human warships that weren't even supposed to exist. Admiral Morrison's voice came over the communication channel, calm and professional, as if he had just finished routine training exercises instead of saving the galaxy. "Commander Veltar, this is Admiral Morrison of the Terran Defense Fleet. Are you and your crew in need of medical assistance?" It took Veltar several attempts to find his voice. When he finally managed to speak, his words came out as barely more than a whisper. "Admiral ... how did you do that? Our most advanced warships, our best weapons, our entire battle fleet, none of it could even scratch their shields. You made them look like children's toys." Morrison's laugh was dry and without any warmth. "Commander, you made one big mistake. You thought this was something special for us." There was a pause as the human admiral seemed to consider his words. "Son, we've been getting ready for this exact fight since the first human looked up at the night sky and wondered what might be looking back. Every war we've ever fought, every weapon we've ever designed, every battle tactic we've ever learned, it was all just practice for the day when something would try to wipe out intelligent life in this part of the universe. The alien survivors watched through their damaged viewports as the human fleet began what they called recovery operations. There was no celebration among the human crews, no victory speeches or triumphant music. The humans simply got to work with the same mechanical efficiency they had shown during the battle, collecting their dead and wounded, assessing damage, and preparing for whatever came next. What struck Veltar most was how routine it all seemed to them. The humans moved like this was just another day at the office, not like they had just prevented the extinction of all life in the galaxy. They organized medical teams, coordinated repair crews, and filed reports as if destroying an ancient mechanical plague was as normal as delivering mail. The casualty reports that came over the communication channels made Veltar's blood run cold. 4 human ships were heavily damaged and would need months of repair work. 237 human Marines had been killed during the boarding operations inside harvester vessels. 600 more crew members had been wounded, some critically by the standards of any other species in the galaxy. These losses would have been considered catastrophic. Entire civilizations would have declared days of mourning for such casualties. Council military doctrine taught that losing even 50 soldiers in a single battle was an unacceptable tragedy. The humans called it acceptable losses, and moved on to the next task. Admiral Veltar asked quietly, his voice filled with a mixture of gratitude and terror. "What do you want in return for saving us? The Council will need to know what payment you require for this service." The communication channel went silent for a long moment. When Morrison finally replied, his words sent chills through every alien listening. "Nothing, Commander. We don't want anything. This is just what we do." His voice was matter-of-fact, as if he was explaining something obvious to a child. "But you might want to pass a message along to your Galactic Council. Next time you run into something like this, don't wait so long before you call us. We prefer to deal with problems before they turn into galaxy-ending disasters." As the human fleet began to organize for departure, Veltar realized something that would change galactic politics forever. The Council had always thought of humans as primitive barbarians from a dangerous world, too violent and unpredictable to be trusted with advanced technology. They had laws specifically designed to keep humans isolated and contained. But the truth was far more terrifying than anyone had imagined. Humans weren't the victims of their hostile homeworld. They were its most successful predators. Earth hadn't made them weak and desperate. It had made them into the most dangerous species in the galaxy, and this wasn't even their main fleet. Morrison had mentioned this was just a routine patrol, 12 ships that happened to be in the area when the distress call arrived. If a simple Patrol could destroy a threat that had wiped out entire council armadas. What could humanity's full military do when it was truly threatened? The humans began jumping back to faster-than-light travel, disappearing into the void as quickly as they had arrived. They left behind a star system full of metal debris and a handful of alien survivors, who would spend the rest of their lives trying to convince the galaxy that everything they thought they knew about humans was wrong. Humanity hadn't saved the galaxy by accident. They had been preparing for this fight for their entire evolutionary history. They were ready because being ready was the only way to survive on a world that tried to kill everything that lived on it. The galaxy's primitive Deathworlders had just proven they weren't primitive at all. They were exactly what the universe needed when something truly dangerous showed up, and they were just getting started. Retriclod can make mistakes. Please double-check responses.